Well, I definitely wanted to help out with the pandemic. Obviously, we had been kicked off rotations at the time since there wasn't enough PPE for us to actually help out in the hospital. So I wanted to try to find a way to help out, and this was a great way to do it. Also, the fact that we couldn't really do any clinical electives meant that we had a whole month or two that was open at the beginning of the pandemic. It was really positive. They had a lot of different ways that people could help out. I'm going into emergency medicine, so I chose one of the things in the ED itself where we would kind of go in and help manage the PPE supply, since at that point we weren't sure how long the supply would last and if we would have to start, for example, recycling N95 masks. So we had a whole system in place where we would just monitor people taking the masks, and when they came back and needed new ones, they would drop off the old ones so that they could be re-sterilized and saved to be used if we ever ran out. We kind of just we kind of took over the nurse manager's office during this time, so got turned into like the PPE supply room, and we'd just all take 4-hour shifts and be there. At first, we had 2 students there at a time, but one, we weren't really able to distance well in that office, and 2, we decided you didn't really need 2 students there. 1 at a time was fine. So yeah, we just kind of hung out there. Besides the N95s, we were also managing like the gown supplies and gloves and everything, but it was really the N95s that we were most in danger of running out of, I think. No one was really sure what was happening with this virus. Like, was it airborne? Was it just droplets? There were so many unanswered questions. And I think the biggest thing people wanted to do was just try to keep themselves and their patients and everyone around them as safe as possible. So I think for us, even though we weren't having direct patient contact, just it was still kind of a little nerve-wracking going into the hospital. We would pretty much wipe down every single surface we touched. We'd always make sure to have masks on at all times, keep a good distance from other people. So that was probably the biggest challenge. I think the biggest lesson is just like, well, one, when it comes to emergency situation like this, I was really glad to see how well like the whole ED community and really the whole hospital community like came together to solve this. Like, I never saw anybody complain about being at work, even though like it was probably the toughest few months of time that most of those people had ever spent in the ED. Everyone who came by me was mostly in a good mood and mostly like still like ready to be there and willing to serve. The other thing is just keeping good stockpiles of supplies. Like, you don't think about it often, but it turns out that like when you really need supplies and you don't have them, it's a really tough situation to be in. It was kind of annoying being stuck at home all day and not being able to do anything, especially since as medical students, like we're kind of trained and hardwired to like want to help out when things like this happen. So I was glad to have the opportunity to help out in some way, even though it wasn't direct patient care. I'm glad they offered it. I think I honestly would have done all of this anyway, even if they weren't offering elective credit for it. But I think I guess they figured since we couldn't really be taking the normal courses that we would have been taking, and so many of our student body was like willing to help out. I guess the administration figured that it would be good to give us some elective credit time for all the work we were doing.